Hello Year 12s, welcome to this video on management skills. There are three things that you need to do while you're watching this video. The first thing is to take the very best Cornell notes you can. The second thing is to use the pause and rewind functions. Use the pause function if you need to stop this video so that you can take notes. Use the rewind function if you've missed out on any information or want to go back over any information. The third thing that you need to do is to have your vocabulary sheets in front of you. When we come across a term that you need to define, make sure you write that definition in your vocabulary sheets and also include any other words that you may not be familiar with. Once you've finished this video, please make sure that you read the pages of the textbook referred to on this first slide. And if you find any information from that reading that you think is useful, supplement your Cornell notes with that information. Let's just reorientate ourselves as to where we are. In previous lessons, we have looked at management styles and their appropriateness. That is, their suitability for use in different situations. In this video, we are going to look at management skills and their appropriateness. That is, the situations in which different management skills should be used. Management styles, combined with management skills, if they are combined appropriately, should lead to effective management, which after all is what we would like to aim for. There are two learning intentions for this video, which I've set out on this slide. Please make sure that you write these learning intentions in your Cornell notes. The first learning intention is that you should be able to analyze and discuss the different kinds of management skills necessary for successful business management. The purpose of this video is to assist you to achieve this learning intention. The second learning intention is that you should be able to evaluate the appropriateness of management skills in a range of business situations. The information in this video will help you to do that, but we'll be achieving this learning intention largely through you completing the tasks that I give you in class. There are 10 management skills that managers need. We'll be looking at each of them, and I'm going to highlight for you the most significant ones. That is, the ones that you need to focus on. These skills are as follows: communication skills, delegation skills, planning skills, leading skills, decision-making skills, and interpersonal skills. These are the most important management skills, and we'll be looking at these in a bit of detail. You need to understand this detail. The other 4 skills are time management, stress management, analytical skills, and technical skills. We won't be spending much time on these. You need to be aware of their existence, but you don't really need to understand them in any degree of detail. The first kind of management skill is communication skills. Communication is the exchange of information between the manager and other stakeholders of the business. In your vocabulary sheets, look down the left-hand side, find the term communication, and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, please highlight the words in red bold italics and make sure that if you're ever defining communication, you include those highlighted words in your definition. The first important point about communication is that managers have to be skilled not just at giving information, but also at receiving information and taking that information into account in their decisions. In other words, in effective communication, there is a two-way exchange of information, which includes feedback to the manager. The second important point about communication is that managers need to be able to communicate with a range of different stakeholders of the business. In our videos on management styles, we have seen that managers have to be able to give clear directions to employees. And where they use a consultative or participative management style, managers have to be able to take into account feedback from employees. But managers also need to communicate with other stakeholders of the business. For example, managers need to be able to report to shareholders on how the business is going. This will often be through written reports, but also at meetings such as the company's annual general meeting. Managers need to be able to take feedback from customers about customers' requirements. For example, about whether the product that is being made by the business can be improved, and if so, how. Managers need to be able to negotiate with suppliers for the supply of inputs to the business and make sure that suppliers understand the requirements of the business. And managers need to be able to communicate with the community, for example, about the good things that the business is doing, such as sponsoring the local football team, as well as in situations where business operations may have had an adverse effect on the community. For instance, as where equipment has malfunctioned and as a result the environment has been polluted. In such a case, the manager will need to be able to explain to the community what has happened and what the business is doing about it. Now, the manager will need to have a different communication style depending on the stakeholders with which the manager is communicating. For example, shareholders, customers and suppliers are likely to be more sophisticated than members of the general community, and so managers will have to take this into account in the way they communicate with those different stakeholders. Finally, managers will need to be able to communicate in writing, for example by using emails and through writing more formal reports, and they also need to communicate verbally, that is, by talking with people and making sure they listen to people and understand what people are saying back to them. The second set of skills that managers require is delegation skills. Delegation refers to the manager passing their authority to perform tasks or make decisions to employees who are further down the chain of command. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the word delegation and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, please highlight the words in red bold italics type. And if you ever need to define delegation, try to remember to include these highlighted words in your definition. To give you an example, the Chief Executive Officer or CEO of a business has general responsibility for running the business. However, the CEO can't run the business all by themselves, and therefore the CEO will typically appoint other senior managers to help them run the business. This may include a general manager for sales and marketing. Now, this is an example of the delegation of authority from the CEO to the general manager for sales and marketing. The CEO is responsible for running the entire business, including its sales and marketing function. However, the CEO will delegate authority to run the sales and marketing function to the general manager for sales and marketing, who will then have responsibility for running the sales and marketing function of the business. This means that the general manager for sales and marketing will make decisions about things such as the advertising campaigns that the business will run. Now, the general manager for sales and marketing will also delegate some of their authority. They might give responsibility for particular customers to employees who are below them in the chain of command. These account managers might, for instance, be authorised to give discounts to the customers for whom they're responsible up to a certain dollar value. So you can see that these are all examples where a manager higher up in the chain of command passes authority to perform tasks or make decisions down to employees who are below them in the chain of command. There are a number of benefits to delegation. First, delegation enables the manager to share their workload and to avoid log jams. A manager can't do everything by themselves, and if they try to do everything by themselves, then they are likely to become very stressed and overworked. In addition, there's likely to be a build-up or logjam of things that need to be done, but which aren't being done simply because the manager hasn't got the time to do them. Second, delegation frees up the manager to concentrate on more important tasks such as long-term planning. It makes evident sense for a manager to delegate the performance of less important tasks down the chain of command to employees below the manager. Third, delegation is important to enable employees to develop their skills. Delegating authority to employees to perform tasks or make decisions that are generally made by managers higher up in the chain of command is an important way of training up employees to become managers. They also need to develop the skills which managers have. Fourthly and finally, delegation is a way in which managers can demonstrate their trust in their employees. As we've already seen when we've been discussing the consultative and participative management styles, it's important to involve employees in decision-making so that they feel they are valued. Employees who feel that they are valued will be more motivated to work harder for the business. That is, they'll become more productive. In addition, it's important that employees have high levels of job satisfaction. And employees will have high levels of job satisfaction if they are being given more responsibility. That's because they'll feel more responsible, and this added responsibility will also make their job more interesting and challenging. It's very important that employees are satisfied with their jobs because dissatisfied employees are likely to leave the business, and it's expensive for the business to recruit and train new staff to replace those employees. There are 5 steps which need to be followed wherever a manager is considering delegating a task. The first step is for the manager to determine the task to be delegated. There are some tasks which should be delegated and some tasks which should not be delegated. Tasks which are suitable for delegation include routine or time-consuming tasks, and it's suitable to delegate these tasks because they generally don't require a high level of skill to perform them. On the other hand, it's generally not suitable to delegate tasks such as strategic planning or decisions that are high risk or high cost or confidential matters. It's generally not appropriate to delegate these kinds of tasks because these are precisely the tasks which managers are appointed to perform, and it's appropriate that they take personal responsibility for performing these kinds of tasks. The second step is for the manager to select the employee, that is the delegate, who is to perform the delegated task. And in making their selection, it's important that the manager is satisfied that the delegate has the skills which are necessary to perform the delegated task. The third step is for the manager to define the scope of the delegated task. And this is important because the delegate needs to understand what they have to do, that is, they need to understand the scope of the task. They need to understand what standard they have to perform that task to, and they also need to understand the deadlines, that is, the times by which the task has to be performed. This clearly means that the manager needs to have good communication skills because the manager needs to be clear in communicating all of these things to the employee. So you can see here there is a clear link between delegation skills and the communication skills that we've already looked at. The fourth step is for the manager to monitor performance of the delegated task. Even though the manager has delegated the task, it doesn't mean that the manager can just wash their hands of responsibility for the performance of the task. And what this means is that the manager needs to establish checkpoints, that is, points along the way when they will check on how the delegate is going in performing their delegated task. The fifth and final step is for the manager to review the performance of the delegated task and, if necessary, to revise the delegation. For example, it may become clear during the performance of the delegated task that the employee to whom that task has been delegated isn't actually properly qualified to perform it, so it may be necessary to find another person to perform that task. Or it may become clear as the task is being performed that the description of the task needs to be changed. Perhaps the task has become bigger than the manager thought it would be, and so it's necessary to refine the scope of that task, or perhaps to give someone else responsibility for performing part of that task. So this step involves the manager in assessing the performance of the delegated task and providing feedback to the delegate. Again, you can see that this requires good communication skills, so there's a clear link here between delegation skills and the communication skills that we've already looked at. The third set of skills that managers require is planning skills. Planning entails the manager setting objectives for the business and developing a plan to achieve those objectives. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheet and write this definition in there opposite the term planning. Once you've done that, please highlight the words in red, bold, italicized type. And if you need to define planning, try to remember to use the highlighted words in your definition. As I've often said to you, business management is about boxes and links. This is an example of a link, because planning skills are closely related to business objectives, which we've looked at in earlier lessons. A critical part of planning is deciding the objectives of the business and then working out a plan or strategy to achieve those objectives. There are 3 levels of planning. The first level is strategic planning. Strategic planning is long-term planning. That is, it's planning which is undertaken for 2 to 5 years in the future. The business objectives that are set as part of this kind of planning are the corporate objectives that we have discussed in the video on business objectives. These objectives set the strategic direction of the business in a way that is consistent with achieving the objectives that are set out in the mission statement, which in turn supports the objectives that are set out in the business's vision statement. Put another way, the purpose of the corporate objectives is to act as stepping stones to achieving the objectives in the mission statement, and the mission statement sets out the strategy for achieving the objectives which are set out in the vision statement. Strategic planning is undertaken by senior managers for the business as a whole. The second level of planning is tactical planning. Tactical planning is medium-term planning. That is, it's planning which is undertaken for 1 to 2 years in the future. The business objectives that are set out as part of this kind of planning are the tactical objectives that we discussed in the video on business objectives. These objectives are set by middle-level managers for their business unit and must be consistent with the corporate objectives which are set as part of strategic planning. The purpose of tactical planning is to set objectives that act as stepping stones to achieve the business objectives which are established through strategic planning. In this way, each business unit has objectives, the achievement of which will contribute to the achievement of the corporate objectives of the business. The third level of planning is operational planning. Operational planning is short-term planning. That is, it's planning which is undertaken for less than 1 year in the future. The business objectives that are set out as part of this kind of planning are the operational objectives that we discussed in the video on business objectives. These objectives are set by frontline managers for their business units and must be consistent with the tactical objectives which are set as part of tactical planning. The purpose of operational planning is to set objectives for teams and individuals, such as output schedules and sales targets. There are 5 steps that a manager should follow in exercising planning skills. The first step is for the manager to set the objectives that the manager wants to achieve. It's important that these objectives are consistent with the business's business objectives, and in particular it's important that these objectives are consistent with the overall objectives for the business as set out in the business's vision statement and mission statement. The second step is that the manager needs to gather information by analysing the internal and external environment and consulting with stakeholders. The manager needs to gather this information to enable the manager to make informed plans. The third step is for the manager to identify strengths and opportunities that can help the business achieve its objectives, and also weaknesses and threats that can impede or hinder or prevent the business from achieving its objectives. This can be done by the manager using a SWOT analysis. There are 4 elements to a SWOT analysis. In the context of the internal environment of the business, there are both strengths and weaknesses. Strengths are factors within the control of the business that have a positive impact on the business. An example of a strength is a good business reputation. The business is able to control its reputation because its reputation depends on factors such as how the business trains its employees, how the business's employees interact with customers, how the business develops its products, how the business provides customer service, and so on. On the other hand, weaknesses are factors within the control of the business that have a negative impact on the business. An example of a weakness is employee morale, or at least poor employee morale. Employee morale is within the control of the business because employee morale is affected by factors such as how the business treats its employees, whether the business pays its employees fairly, whether the employees have satisfying work-life balance, whether the employees are treated properly and with respect, and whether the business values the feedback from its employees. In the context of the external environment, there are both opportunities and threats. Opportunities are factors outside the control of the business that can contribute to the success of the business. An example of an opportunity is a growing economy. Businesses can't control or influence the economy, but a growing economy can contribute to the success of the business because, for example, if the economy is growing, then customers will have more money to spend on buying products from the business. On the other hand, threats are factors that are outside the control of the business that could negatively affect the business. An example of a threat is where a key supplier increases the prices that it charges for inputs that are bought by the business. The business can't influence the prices which the key supplier charges it, but the business does have a choice as to whether it continues to buy inputs from that supplier or not. The fourth step that a manager needs to take in exercising the planning function is to develop an action plan or strategy to take advantages of the opportunities and strengths that the manager has identified in its SWOT planning, and also to develop contingency plans, that is, what-if plans, to deal with the threats and weaknesses that the manager has identified in the course of undertaking the SWOT analysis. And finally, the fifth step that the manager needs to take in planning is to evaluate the results of the action plan that has been implemented as part of the planning process. And this is necessary because if, for example, the action plan has fallen short, so that the plan hasn't been fully implemented, then the manager will need to decide why the action plan has fallen short and how to adjust the action plan to successfully achieve the objectives set out in the planning process. The fourth set of skills that managers need is leading skills. Leading refers to the manager guiding employees towards achieving the business objectives. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the word leading and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, please highlight the words in red bold italics, and if you ever need to define leading, try to remember to include these highlighted words in your definition. Now, leading is important because it's focused on having employees work towards achieving the objectives of the business. And, as we've seen, every successful business needs to have business objectives. That's because business objectives set the overall direction and focus of the business. I've set out on this slide some of the characteristics that a manager needs to have to be an effective leader. First, an effective leader ensures that tasks are successfully completed. And certainly one of the key functions of a manager is to make sure that the job is done. Secondly, an effective leader knows when to step in and when to step away. This means that a manager needs to know when they should intervene in a situation and make decisions, and when it's better to leave decision-making up to their employees. Thirdly, an effective manager is prepared to delegate, and fourthly, an effective manager is a good communicator. Now, we've looked at delegation and communication skills previously, and so you should know what they are and why it's important that managers have these skills. But here's a word of warning. If a SAC or exam question asks you to, for example, describe 2 management skills, and you choose to describe both delegation skills and leading skills, or both communication skills and leading skills, then you should not focus on an effective leader as being prepared to delegate or as being a good communicator. This is because there will then be too much overlap between your separate description of delegation or communication skills on the one hand and your description of those skills in the context of leading skills on the other hand. In such a case, you should instead focus on the other characteristics of an effective leader. The 5th characteristic of an effective leader is that they are flexible. That is, they're able to respond quickly and effectively to change. 6thly, an effective leader acts as a role model. That is, they act as a good example for their employees. They model the behaviour that they expect their employees to demonstrate. The 7th and final characteristic of an effective leader is that an effective leader is a team leader. And this is particularly important for managers who use the consultative or participative management style. This is because where these management styles are used, employees are involved in decision-making with the manager, and this requires a degree of teamwork between the manager and those employees. Now, to be a good team leader, a manager must have yet another set of characteristics. The manager must be able to act as a mentor, that is, as someone who encourages and supports their employees and who looks out for opportunities that can be used to develop the skills of their employees. A manager will be a good team leader where they encourage contributions from all team members and make use of each member's skills and expertise. A manager will be a good team leader where they're able to build a cohesive team where members listen to and respect each other's views. And finally, a manager will be a good team leader where they're able to resolve disputes between team members. It's important that the manager can manage the dynamics between team members, and this means that the manager needs to be aware of how their employees interact and how they are likely to react in different situations. The 5th set of skills that managers require is decision-making or problem-solving skills. In decision-making or problem-solving, the manager selects the best way to achieve an objective or to solve a problem where there is a range of different alternatives. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the word decision-making and write this definition in there. Now, decision-making is a skill that most people use as part of their everyday lives. For example, as students, you have to make decisions about how to balance your homework commitments against your personal and extracurricular commitments. In addition, if you've only got limited time, for example 2 hours to do your homework on one night, and you have business management homework and English homework, and you've got to study for a maths SAC the next day, then you need to make decisions about what subjects to prioritise. And of course the answer is you'll always do your business management homework first. Well, managers may face a number of difficulties in making decisions. Firstly, it may be that the manager doesn't know all of the relevant information, that is, all of the information they need to make a fully informed decision. That is, there may be uncertainties, and it may be that some of this missing information is information which, if the manager had it, would cause them to make a different decision. Secondly, different decisions have different impacts and trade-offs. It's very rare for a decision to be absolutely clear-cut, so that a manager can be absolutely certain that that decision is the right one. Instead, most decisions have advantages and disadvantages, and a manager needs to weigh up those advantages and disadvantages in choosing what decision to make. Thirdly, some decisions have very high risk consequences. For example, where the decision is whether the business should invest in developing a new product, then a decision to invest in that new product may require the expenditure of a lot of money on research and development, on marketing and advertising, on actually producing the product, and on training employees to make the product. Now, if it turns out that the product is not successful, then obviously the business will have lost a lot of money. And particularly if the business has borrowed money from, say, a bank, then if the business can't repay that money, then the bank might decide to sell some assets of the business. So you can see that in that case, the decision is one which has high risk consequences if it turns out to be the wrong decision. Fourthly, it's not always possible for a manager to predict the reactions of people to decisions which the manager makes. For example, it may be that the manager makes a decision to introduce new technology into the business, and as a result of that decision, it's necessary for the business to reduce its workforce because employees are made redundant. They're no longer needed because of that new technology. In such a case, it may be that the workforce accepts the decision, provided that the business retrains those employees who are being made redundant so that they're able to obtain other jobs. Alternatively, it may be that the workforce decides to go on strike and picket the business, and this, of course, will have adverse consequences for the business because then the business is not able to make and sell its products. And fifthly, where a manager is trying to make a decision, there will often be a range of alternatives to choose from. These alternatives will each have different benefits and costs, and it's necessary for the manager to weigh up those benefits and costs in deciding which alternative to choose. There are 6 steps that a manager should follow in making a decision. The first step is for the manager to identify the problem. That is, the manager needs to know what the issue is that the manager is making the decision about. And the manager must also be able to define their objectives in solving the problem. That is, what is the manager trying to achieve by solving the particular issue? The second step is for the manager to gather information about the causes of the problem. And this is necessary because if the manager is able to understand how the problem came about, then that can enable the manager to develop ideas about how to deal with the problem. The third step is for the manager to develop alternative solutions to solve the problem. And this is where teamwork with employees may be very valuable, because employees may be able to suggest a range of possible solutions to the problem. This, of course, is a benefit of the consultative or participative management style, which involves employees in decision-making and problem-solving. An important point, though, is that the manager needs to be able to develop different alternatives to choose from. The fourth step is for the manager to analyse all of these alternative solutions by evaluating them in terms of their ability to achieve the objective in step 1, that is the objective or objectives that the manager wants to achieve by solving the problem in the first place. And what this means is that the manager will need to look at the strengths, weaknesses, advantages, disadvantages, benefits and costs of each alternative, and then be able to rank each alternative from best to worst. The fifth step is for the manager to be able to choose the best alternative and nominate the employees who are going to be responsible for implementing that solution to the problem. The sixth and final step is for the manager to periodically evaluate the implementation of the solution that the manager has chosen. And this is necessary because sometimes in the process of implementing a solution, the manager will come across other problems, and as a result, the manager may need to reconsider whether the solution the manager has chosen is the best solution, or whether instead it's necessary to select an alternative solution. This brings us to the sixth and last important set of skills that managers need, which is interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills are skills used by the manager every day to communicate and interact with other people. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the term interpersonal skills, and write this definition in there. Now, managers need interpersonal skills because managers are responsible for managing employees, and this means that a manager has to be able to communicate and interact effectively with their employees. Managers also need interpersonal skills because they need to be able to communicate and interact with other stakeholders of the business, in particular shareholders, suppliers, and customers. I've set out on this slide some key interpersonal skills. The first key interpersonal skill is that the manager needs to be a good communicator. We've previously looked at communication skills and the reason that managers need communication skills. But here's a word of warning. If a SAC or exam question asks you to, for example, describe 2 management skills, you should not choose to describe both communication skills and interpersonal skills. This is because communication lies at the heart of interpersonal skills, and so there will be too much overlap between your separate description of communication skills on the one hand and your description of communication skills in the context of interpersonal skills on the other hand. Well, let's now look at the other key interpersonal skills that managers need. They need to be able to understand and respect other points of view. They need to be able to regulate their emotions and be aware of the effect of their emotions on other people. They need to be able to motivate and encourage other people, particularly their employees. They need to be able to inspire loyalty and commitment from other people, particularly again from their employees. They need to be ethical and honest. And finally, they need to be able to manage and resolve conflict. Now, this is especially important where the manager has a consultative or participative management style, because where the manager has these kinds of management styles, then the manager will work with the employees in a team-like environment to develop solutions and solve problems and make decisions. Inevitably, people are going to have different views, and some people may express their views forcibly. So the manager needs to be able to manage their team dynamics so as to ensure that their team members continue to operate productively and harmoniously together. That is, the manager needs the skills to be able to hold their team together. On this slide, I've set out the remaining 4 management skills. While you need to know of their existence, you don't need to know much about them in detail, and I would avoid using these management skills to answer a SAC or exam question except as a matter of last resort. The first of these other skills is time management. Time management refers to the efficient use of work time, which involves setting and prioritising tasks, allocating time, and avoiding time-wasting activities. The second kind of skills that we're looking at here are stress management skills, and these are skills required by a manager to reduce the stress levels of both the manager and their employees. Stress can be detrimental to health, and it costs businesses money because if employees are stressed, then there is likely to be an increase in absenteeism, reduced performance of employees, and reduced motivation of employees. There can be numerous causes of stress in the workplace, including lack of control over workload, unclear job descriptions, inadequate training, organisational changes, such as where the business is being restructured and there will be redundancies amongst staff, lack of communication and consultation, interpersonal conflict, workplace bullying and harassment, and poor work-life balance. In fact, it's been estimated that stress accounts for a loss of around $73 million per annum to the Victorian economy. Analytical skills, these are skills required to examine a situation or set of circumstances in order to understand and interpret it. Analytical skills are necessary for decision making or problem solving, which is the skill that we've already looked at. Analytical skills are required in decision making or problem solving because these require the manager to be able to come up with alternative solutions and analyse which of those solutions is best. And finally, we have technical skills, which are specialist skills such as accounting, legal, finance, marketing, and information technology skills. These are important skills for middle level and frontline managers because these managers are heavily involved in the technical aspects of the operations of the business, that is, in the day-to-day operation of the business. You'll be pleased to know that that now brings us to the end of this video. You now have the information to be able to achieve the first learning intention, which is that you should be able to analyse and discuss the different kinds of management skills necessary for successful business management. The second learning intention is that you should be able to evaluate the appropriateness of management skills in a range of business situations. The information in this video will help you to achieve this learning intention, but we will be achieving this learning intention largely through you completing the tasks that I will give you in class. Remember to read the pages from the textbook referred to on the first slide, and if you find any additional information from that reading that you think is useful, please supplement your Cornell notes with that information. Well, thank you very much for your attention.